My name is Jennifer Lopez, I'm 63 years old, and when my daughter got married, I hid her $5 million inheritance. Not out of greed, not out of spite, but just to see who would treat me right. And thank God I did, because right after the wedding, she and her new husband showed up at my doorstep with a notary, ready to claim what they thought was theirs. But before I tell you how it all unfolded, before I share the pain that still keeps me up at night, please make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching from. This one's personal. This one cuts deep. This is about the moment I realized my own daughter had forgotten who raised her. Let me take you back to where it all began. 2 years ago, I lost my husband, Richard. 52 years of marriage, gone in an instant. Heart attack. No warning. One moment we were planning our retirement trip to Italy, the next moment I was standing in a funeral home picking out a casket for the only man I'd ever loved. Do you know what that feels like? To have your entire world collapse while everyone around you just keeps moving like nothing happened? Richard was everything to me. He wasn't a perfect man, but he was mine. We built a life together from nothing. Absolutely nothing. When we got married, we had $300 between us and a borrowed apartment that smelled like mildew and broken dreams. But we worked. God, did we work? He took double shifts at the factory while I cleaned houses during the day and waited tables at night. Our hands were raw, our backs were broken, but our hearts were full because we had each other and we had Amanda. Our baby girl. Our only child. We tried for years to have children, went through 3 miscarriages that nearly destroyed me, and when Amanda finally came into this world, healthy and screaming, I thought God had finally answered my prayers. I thought I was blessed. I thought I knew what unconditional love meant. I raised that girl with everything I had. Everything. When Richard was working those long shifts, I was the one braiding her hair for school. I was the one staying up until midnight helping her with homework. I was the one who sold my mother's jewelry so she could go on the school trip to Washington, D.C. because I couldn't bear to see her left behind while all her friends went. I taught her to read before she even started kindergarten. I taught her to ride a bike, holding on to that seat until my arms ached, running beside her until she found her balance. I taught her about honesty, about kindness, about treating people with respect regardless of how much money they had in their pockets. Character over currency, baby, I used to tell her. That's what makes you rich. And she would look up at me with those big brown eyes and nod like she understood. Like she really got it. I thought she did. God help me, I really thought she did. Richard and I, we never became millionaires through our work, but we were smart. We saved every penny we could. We invested carefully. Richard had a good head for business, even without the fancy education. He read every financial book he could get his hands on from the library. He studied the market. And slowly, over decades of sacrifice and careful planning, we built something. We built a nest egg. We built security. We built a $5 million inheritance that was meant to give Amanda the kind of life we never had. $5 million. That's what a lifetime of sacrifice looks like when you turn it into numbers on a page. Richard made me promise him something before he died. We were in the hospital, and he knew he wasn't going to make it. The doctors had given us that look, you know the one. That sympathetic, defeated look that says, there's nothing more we can do. His hand was so weak in mine, barely able to squeeze back, but his eyes were still sharp. Still clear. Jennifer, he whispered, his voice raspy from the oxygen tube they'd removed, promise me something. Anything, I said, tears streaming down my face. Anything, my love. Test her heart before you trust her hands, he said. The money we saved, it's for Amanda, but make sure she's ready for it. Make sure she understands what it really means. What it cost us. Make sure she knows that money without character is just paper with pictures on it. I didn't understand what he meant at the time. I was too broken, too shattered by grief to process his words. But I nodded. I promised. And 3 hours later, he was gone, and I was alone in a hospital room with nothing but the sound of a flatlined monitor and the echo of his final words. The first year after Richard died was hell. Pure, unfiltered hell. I would wake up reaching for him and find empty space. Cold sheets. Silence. The house we'd filled with 52 years of memories felt like a museum of a life that no longer existed. Every corner held a ghost. His coffee cup is still in the cabinet. His reading glasses on the nightstand. His jacket was still hanging by the door because I couldn't bear to move it. Amanda came around more during that time. She was good about checking in, calling me every few days, and visiting on Sundays. We'd have dinner together, and she'd tell me about her job at the marketing firm, about her friends, about the new restaurant she'd tried. Normal mother-daughter things. Safe things. Things that made me feel like maybe, just maybe, we'd be okay. And then she met Ethan. I'll never forget the day she brought him to meet me. It was about 6 months after Richard's funeral. She called me that morning, all breathless and excited in a way I hadn't heard since she was a teenager. "Mom, I met someone. Someone amazing. I want you to meet him. Can we come over for dinner this Saturday?" My heart leapt. My baby girl, happy again. Moving forward. Finding love. Isn't that what every mother wants? To see their child find someone who lights up their world the way Richard lit up mine? "Of course, sweetheart," I said, already planning the menu in my head. "I'll make your favorite. The pot roast with the honey-glazed carrots." That Saturday, I cleaned the house until it sparkled. I set the good china out, the stuff we only used for special occasions. I even put on the pearl earrings Richard gave me for our 40th anniversary. I wanted to make a good impression. I wanted this Ethan to see that my daughter came from a family with values, with warmth, with love. They arrived at 6 o'clock sharp. Amanda looked radiant in a blue dress I'd never seen before, probably new and expensive based on the fabric. And Ethan, well, Ethan looked exactly like what he was, polished, put together, and calculating. He was handsome, I'll give him that. Tall, with perfectly styled dark hair and a smile that showed too many teeth. The kind of smile that salesmen use when they want you to sign on the dotted line. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, and his shoes were so shiny I could see my reflection in them. "Mrs. Lopez," he said, extending his hand with that smile. "It's such an honor to finally meet you. Amanda talks about you constantly." His handshake was firm. Too firm. Like he was trying to prove something. "Please, call me Jennifer," I said, smiling back even though something in my gut twisted uncomfortably. Come in, come in. Dinner's almost ready." We sat down to eat, and at first, everything seemed fine. Ethan complimented the food, asked about the photos on the wall, laughed at appropriate moments. But then the questions started. Casual at first. Innocent sounding. "So, Jennifer, Amanda mentioned you own this house outright? That's impressive in this economy. This is a beautiful neighborhood. Property values here must be quite high, I'd imagine?" Amanda said her father worked in manufacturing. He must have had excellent benefits. Each question felt like a probe. Like he was conducting an inventory of my life's assets right there at my dinner table. And Amanda, my sweet Amanda, she just sat there smiling, completely oblivious to what was happening. Or maybe she wasn't oblivious. Maybe she just didn't care. That night, after they left, I sat in Richard's favorite chair and cried. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones the way you can feel a storm coming even when the sky is still clear. This Ethan, he wasn't asking about Amanda's childhood, about her dreams, about what kind of mother I was. He was asking about assets. About money. About what could be converted into dollar signs. Test her heart before you trust her hands. Richard's words came back to me like a whisper from beyond the grave. Over the next few months, Ethan became a fixture in Amanda's life, and consequently, in mine. They moved fast. Too fast. Within weeks, they were inseparable. Within 2 months, he'd moved into her apartment. And his questions, they never stopped. They just got more direct. Amanda mentioned her father left an inheritance. That must be a huge relief for you both. Have you thought about investing strategies? I know some excellent financial advisors who specialize in estate planning. You know, Jennifer, with proper management, a substantial inheritance could generate passive income for generations. The word inheritance came up constantly. Like it was the only thing he cared about. Like my daughter was just a doorway to a vault he wanted to open. I started to watch Amanda more carefully during these conversations. Looking for signs that she saw what I saw. That she recognized the red flags waving frantically in front of our faces. But she was blinded by what she thought was love. She'd gaze at him with adoring eyes while he talked about their financial future and maximizing generational wealth. She'd laugh when he joked about being able to retire young if they played their cards right. It made me sick. Physically sick. I'd go home after spending time with them and feel nauseous, like I'd swallowed poison. That's when I made the decision. That's when I understood what Richard had been trying to tell me in his final moments. I needed to test her. I needed to see if my daughter would choose money over me. I needed to know if Ethan's influence had corrupted the values I'd spent 32 years trying to instill in her. I called my lawyer, Marcus, a man Richard and I had trusted for decades. I explained the situation, and without judgment, he helped me set up a trust. The $5 million inheritance that Richard had left for Amanda, I transferred it into a trust fund under my name with strict conditions. The money still existed, but on paper, it looked like I was just a widow living on life insurance and Social Security. The inheritance was hidden, locked away, invisible to anyone who came looking for it with greedy eyes and a notary in tow. Are you sure about this, Jennifer? Marcus asked me as I signed the paperwork. This is a big step. Amanda might feel betrayed if she finds out. If she feels betrayed by this, I said, my hand shaking as I wrote my signature, then she's already lost sight of what really matters. And if that's true, then she's not ready for this money anyway. Richard wanted me to test her character. This is how I'm going to do it. Marcus nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. He'd seen enough families torn apart by inheritance disputes to know I wasn't being paranoid. I was being careful. And careful is what you have to be when vultures start circling. I went home that day feeling both relieved and terrified. What if I was wrong? What if I was being an overprotective, paranoid old woman who was seeing threats where there were none? What if Ethan genuinely loved Amanda and I was sabotaging my daughter's happiness because I couldn't let go? But then I'd remember his questions. His calculating eyes. The way he steered every conversation toward money and assets and financial planning. And I'd know I was doing the right thing. The wedding announcement came 4 months after they'd met. 4 months. I'd known Richard for 3 years before he proposed, and even then, we had a 2-year engagement to make sure we were ready. But Amanda called me one Tuesday morning, squealing with excitement. Mom. Mom. Ethan proposed. We're getting married. That's wonderful, sweetheart, I said, trying to inject enthusiasm into my voice that I didn't feel. When were you thinking? Next year? Spring weddings are beautiful. Actually, she said, and I could hear the nervousness creeping into her voice, we were thinking in 6 months. December. A winter wedding. 6 months. They'd known each other for 4 months and would be married in 6. 10 months total from meeting to marriage. It was reckless. It was rushed. It was exactly what predators do when they've found their prey and want to seal the deal before anyone can intervene. That's very fast, Amanda, I said carefully. Are you sure you're ready? Marriage is forever. Or it should be. Mom, when you know, she said, and I could hear Ethan's voice in her words. That's what he'd probably told her, feeding her romantic notions while he counted the millions in his head. Plus, we're not getting any younger. I want to start our life together as soon as possible. She was 32. Not exactly ancient. But I bit my tongue. I'd already said my piece. Well, congratulations, sweetheart. I'm happy for you if you're happy. But I wasn't happy. I was terrified. And my terror only grew as the wedding planning began. Ethan's mother got involved immediately. Patricia, her name was. A thin woman with expensive taste and a controlling personality that made my skin crawl. She tried to take over everything, the venue, the guest list, the menu, even Amanda's dress. And every decision came with a price tag that made my head spin. We need to make a statement, Patricia said during one particularly tense planning meeting at Amanda's apartment. I'd been invited, but I was clearly just an accessory to the conversation, not an active participant. The Sterling Country Club can accommodate 300 guests. I've already spoken to the event coordinator. 300? I said, unable to stop myself. Amanda, do you even know 300 people? Mom, it's not about that, Amanda said, not meeting my eyes. It's about celebrating with the community. With Ethan's business associates and clients. Business associates, I repeated. This is your wedding, Amanda. Your special day. Since when did it become a networking event? Ethan laughed, that salesman laugh that made my teeth ache. Jennifer, you're so traditional. Modern weddings are different. They're about bringing communities together, about building connections. Who knows? Maybe some of these connections will lead to opportunities for all of us. Opportunities for all of us. There it was again. The implication that we were all in this together, all going to benefit from this union. Except they weren't talking about love or family. They were talking about money and connections and opportunities. And who exactly is paying for this 300-person extravaganza? I asked, looking directly at Amanda. She shifted uncomfortably. We are, Mom. Ethan and I. Well, mostly Ethan's parents. They've offered to cover the majority of the costs. Of course they had. Because this wasn't about Amanda. This was about the Sterlings showing off, about them making an investment they expected to pay dividends once the inheritance came through. I tried to talk to Amanda alone several times during the planning process. I'd call her, ask her to lunch, just the two of us, like we used to do. But there was always an excuse. She was busy with work. She had a dress fitting. Ethan had planned a surprise. She was always just out of reach, slipping away from me like water through my fingers. The few times I did manage to see her alone, she was different. Distant. When I'd try to express my concerns about how fast everything was moving, she'd get defensive. Mom, I know you miss Dad, and I know you're lonely, but you can't project your fears onto my relationship. Ethan loves me. He's good to me. Why can't you just be happy for me? I am happy for you, sweetheart, I'd say, my heart breaking a little more each time. I just want to make sure you're making decisions based on love, not pressure. No one's pressuring me, she'd snap. This is what I want. This is my choice. And frankly, Mom, your constant skepticism is exhausting. Ethan's mother is more supportive than you are. Those words cut deeper than any knife could. Ethan's mother, who'd known her for 4 months, was more supportive than me, the woman who'd given birth to her, raised her, sacrificed everything for her. Because Patricia was supportive of a rushed wedding and excessive spending while I was raising legitimate concerns? I started to realize that I was losing my daughter. Not to death, not to distance, but to greed and manipulation. And there was nothing I could do about it except watch and wait and hope that my test would reveal the truth before it was too late. The bridal shower happened 3 weeks before the wedding. Patricia hosted it at her house, a massive estate in the suburbs with columns and a circular driveway and more square footage than any family could possibly need. I arrived with a gift I'd carefully chosen, a photo album I'd made by hand, filled with pictures of Amanda growing up, each one with a caption about the memory attached to it. Her first day of school. Her high school graduation. Her college acceptance letter. Moments that money couldn't buy. The living room was filled with women I didn't know. Patricia's friends, mostly. Wealthy women with expensive jewelry and designer handbags who looked at me like I was the help who'd accidentally wandered into the party. Amanda was in the center, surrounded by boxes wrapped in silver paper and white bows, laughing at something someone had said. I found a seat in the corner and watched as she opened gift after gift. Expensive china. Crystal champagne flutes. A set of cookware that probably cost more than my car. Designer luggage for their honeymoon in Bali. Each gift was met with squeals of delight and hugs and photos for social media. When she got my gift, she opened it slowly. I saw her face change as she looked through the pages, and saw tears well up in her eyes. For a moment, I thought I'd gotten through to her. I thought I'd reminded her of what really mattered. Then Patricia leaned over, glanced at the album, and said in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "How sweet. Memories. That's lovely, Jennifer, truly. Though I suppose when you can't afford Tiffany's, sentimentality is the next best thing." The room went silent. Amanda's face flushed red, but she didn't defend me. She didn't tell Patricia that her comment was cruel and unnecessary. She just closed the album, set it aside, and reached for the next gift. I sat there, humiliated, watching as my daughter chose social climbing over her own mother. And that's when I heard it. One of Patricia's friends, a blonde woman dripping in diamonds, leaned over to another guest and said, just loud enough for me to hear, "Well, Amanda certainly won the lottery with this marriage. I heard her father left her quite a fortune. Must be nice to marry into money when you already have money." They were talking about Amanda like she was a commodity. Like her value was determined by the inheritance she'd supposedly received. And no one, not Patricia, not Ethan who'd just walked in to deliver champagne, and certainly not Amanda, corrected her. I left the party early, claiming a headache. No one tried to stop me. Amanda barely looked up as I said goodbye. I drove home in a daze, Richard's words echoing in my head louder than ever. Test her heart before you trust her hands. I was testing. And she was failing. The weeks leading up to the wedding were torture. I went through the motions, attending the rehearsal dinner, smiling for photos, pretending everything was fine. But inside, I was dying. Every interaction with Amanda felt forced, performative. She was more concerned with Instagram posts and seating charts than with the fact that her mother was being treated like an afterthought. At the rehearsal dinner, Ethan's father gave a toast that made my blood run cold. "To my son Ethan," he said, raising his glass, "who has found not just a beautiful bride, but a partner who brings more to this marriage than just her smile. Here's to a future built on solid foundations." Solid foundations. He meant money. He meant the inheritance they all assumed would be flowing into their accounts the moment the marriage certificate was signed. And everyone in that room knew it. The knowing looks, the subtle nods, the way people glanced at Amanda and then at me, calculating, assessing. I couldn't eat. I couldn't drink. I just sat there, feeling like I was watching my daughter being auctioned off to the highest bidder, and she was too blind to see it. The wedding day arrived. December 15th, a cold Saturday with snow flurries that everyone said were romantic but just felt foreboding to me. I got dressed in my modest blue dress, the one I'd bought on sale because I didn't see the point in spending a fortune on something I'd wear once. I did my own hair and makeup, my hands shaking as I applied lipstick in the mirror. I looked old. When did I get so old? The woman staring back at me had deep lines around her eyes, gray streaking through her hair that I'd stopped bothering to dye, and a sadness in her expression that no amount of makeup could hide. I drove to the Sterling Country Club alone. No one had offered to arrange transportation for me. No one had asked if I needed help. I was just expected to show up, sit in my assigned seat, and play my role as the mother of the bride who should be grateful her daughter had found such a catch. The venue was obscene. Ice sculptures, thousands of white roses, chandeliers dripping with crystals, a string quartet playing in the corner. Everything was white and silver and cold, just like the family Amanda was marrying into. I found my seat, not at the head table with the wedding party, but at a table in the back with distant relatives I'd never met. The people at my table introduced themselves politely enough, but within minutes, they were all engaged in their own conversations, leaving me to sit in silence. I watched Amanda walk down the aisle on the arm of my brother Tom, since Richard wasn't there to do it. She looked beautiful in her designer gown, her face glowing behind the veil. For a moment, I saw her as she was when she was 6 years old, playing bride with a pillowcase on her head and my old high heels on her feet, demanding that I play the wedding march on our out-of-tune piano. Where had that little girl gone? When had she disappeared? The ceremony was impersonal. The officiant spoke about commitment and partnership, but never about love. Ethan's vows were generic, probably pulled from a website. Amanda's were barely audible, nervous and rushed. When they kissed, it felt more like a business deal being sealed than a sacred union being formed. The reception was worse. I sat at my back table exile while the wedding party took photos that seemed to last for hours. When dinner was finally served, it was some kind of fancy chicken dish that I could barely taste because my throat was tight with unshed tears. The speeches began, and I waited for my turn, the traditional mother of the bride toast. It never came. Patricia gave a speech. Ethan's father gave a speech. The best man gave a speech full of inside jokes I didn't understand. But no one called on me. No one invited the mother of the bride to say a few words about the daughter she'd raised, the little girl who'd become this woman in white. I was invisible. Amanda barely spoke to me during the reception. She'd flutter past my table occasionally, pausing to introduce me to someone, "This is my mom," before moving on to more important guests. "No, how are you?" "No, I'm so glad you're here." Just quick, obligatory acknowledgments that I existed. Ethan's toast was the final insult. He stood up, microphone in hand, his face flushed from champagne, and said, "I want to thank everyone for being here today. Especially Amanda's late father, Richard, whose memory lives on in all the gifts he's given us, including the gift of financial security that will help us build our future together." The crowd laughed like it was a joke, but his eyes found mine across the room, and I saw the truth there. He knew. They all knew. They were all just waiting for the money to change hands. I left the reception early. No one noticed. I drove home through the snow, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white, tears streaming down my face so hard I could barely see the road. I'd just watched my daughter marry a con artist, and there was nothing I could do about it. She'd made her choice. She'd chosen money and status and the Sterling's approval over the mother who'd loved her unconditionally for 32 years. When I got home, I sat in the dark in Richard's chair and cried until I had no tears left. Then I just sat there, empty, staring at the wall, wondering how my life had come to this. I tested her, Richard, I whispered to the darkness. Just like you asked. And she failed. Our baby girl failed. The silence was my only answer. I thought maybe things would settle after the wedding. Maybe once the stress of planning was over, Amanda would come back to me. That we'd rebuild our relationship, different but still meaningful. I was willing to accept that things had changed, that she had a husband now, a new family. I just wanted some small piece of my daughter back. The phone call came 3 days after the wedding. Tuesday morning, just after 9. "Hey, Mom," Amanda's voice was bright, cheerful. "How are you?" "I'm fine, sweetheart," I lied, because what else could I say? "I'm devastated. I'm heartbroken. I feel like I've lost you." "How's married life?" "It's amazing," she gushed. "We're still opening gifts and writing thank you notes." "Listen, Mom, Ethan and I were wondering if we could stop by later today. Around 2? We need to talk to you about something." My heart sank. I knew. Somehow, I knew exactly what this was about. "Of course," I said. "I'll put on some coffee." "Actually, Mom, this is more of a business meeting. You might want to have any financial documents ready. You know, Dad's will, the inheritance papers, that sort of thing." There it was. Not even a week married, and they were already coming for the money. "I'll see what I can find," I said, my voice hollow. "Great. See you at 2. She hung up before I could respond. I spent the next few hours preparing. I pulled out the folder that Marcus had given me, the one that showed the life insurance policy, paid out and used to cover the house. No mention of the $5 million trust. As far as these documents were concerned, I was just a widow living on Social Security and memories. At 1:50, I saw them pull up in Ethan's new BMW. Another expensive purchase, probably made in anticipation of the windfall they expected. They walked up the driveway together, and I noticed they were dressed formally. Amanda in a business suit I'd never seen before. Ethan in another one of his expensive suits. They weren't dressed like a family coming to visit. They were dressed like lawyers coming to collect. And they'd brought someone with them. A man in his 50s, carrying a briefcase, wearing glasses, and a practiced smile. A notary. They'd brought a notary to my house. I answered the door with a smile plastered on my face, though inside I was screaming. "Hi, Mom." Amanda leaned in for a quick hug, perfunctory and cold. "This is Mr. Reeves. He's a notary. We thought it would be easier to handle everything today, get all the paperwork sorted out right away." "How efficient," I said, stepping aside to let them in. They settled in the living room, the same room where Amanda had opened Christmas presents as a child, where she'd watched Saturday morning cartoons, where Richard and I had danced to our wedding song on our anniversaries. Now it was being turned into a conference room for a transaction. Ethan took the lead, because of course he did. Amanda sat beside him, saying nothing, letting him speak for her. "Jennifer, we appreciate you meeting with us on such short notice," he began, pulling out a folder from his briefcase. "We know this might feel a bit formal, but we wanted to handle Richard's estate properly. Amanda, as his daughter, is entitled to the inheritance he left behind, and we've drawn up the paperwork to facilitate the transfer." He slid papers across my coffee table. I didn't look at them. "We've calculated everything," Ethan continued, his tone professional, detached. "The house was paid off with the life insurance, as we understand it, but Richard's investment accounts, savings, and assets should total somewhere around $5 million based on the statements Amanda found in his office years ago." Amanda had been going through her father's papers, looking for evidence of money. While I was grieving, while I was trying to keep our house and our memories intact, she'd been conducting a treasure hunt. "We just need your signature authorizing the transfer," Ethan said, pushing a pen toward me. "Mr. Reeves is here to notarize everything, make it official." This is just a formality, really. The money was always meant for Amanda. We're just making it legal. I looked at Amanda. My daughter. My only child. The little girl I'd rocked to sleep, who I'd taught to read, who I'd supported through every heartbreak and triumph. She couldn't meet my eyes. Amanda, I said softly, ignoring Ethan completely. Do you have something you want to say to me? She glanced at Ethan, like she needed his permission to speak. When he gave her a small nod, she finally looked at me. Mom, this isn't personal, she said, and those words hit me like a physical blow. It's just practical. Dad left this money for me, for my future. Now I'm married, starting a new life, and we need to make sure everything is properly handled. You don't need it. You have the house, your social security, Dad's pension. This money was always meant to be mine. I sat back in my chair, looking at this stranger wearing my daughter's face. Oh, sweetheart, I said, my voice calm despite the hurricane raging inside me. You must mean the life insurance policy. The one your father had through his work. Ethan's smile faltered slightly. The life insurance was used for the house, we know that. We're talking about his investment accounts. His savings. The inheritance he set aside specifically for Amanda. I shook my head slowly. That life insurance was all there was. $300,000. It covered the mortgage and the funeral expenses with barely anything left over. Your father and I lived comfortably, but we weren't wealthy. Everything we had went into keeping this house and making sure you had a good education, Amanda. The room went silent. I watched the color drain from Ethan's face. That's impossible, he said, his voice tight. Richard was a savvy investor. Amanda saw the statements. There were accounts worth millions. From 30 years ago, I said gently. Before we put Amanda through private school. Before we paid for her college. Before we paid for her apartment when she was getting started in her career. Before medical bills and property taxes and life happened. That money was spent giving our daughter the best life we could give her. Ethan stood up abruptly, his professional demeanor cracking. You're lying. You're hiding it somehow. I know about estate law. I know about asset protection. You moved it somewhere. Ethan. Amanda hissed, but he ignored her. Look, he said, trying to regain his composure. Jennifer, I understand wanting to maintain control. But Amanda is legally entitled to her inheritance. If you've hidden assets, that's what? I interrupted, my voice still calm but with an edge of steel. That's what, Ethan? Are you threatening me in my own home? He had the decency to look uncomfortable. I turned to Amanda, who sat frozen on my couch, her face pale. Sweetheart, I need you to answer something honestly. Is money the only reason you're here? Is that all I am to you now? A bank account to be accessed? Mom, that's not fair, she started, but I raised my hand. Because if money is the only reason you're here, then I've already given you everything I have. Everything. My time when I should have been sleeping. My youth that I spent working double shifts to keep you clothed and fed. My love, unconditional and unwavering, even now. My trust, which I'm realizing was terribly misplaced. Tears were streaming down Amanda's face now, but I couldn't tell if they were from shame or frustration that the money wasn't materializing. Your father's will left everything to you, I said, my voice breaking slightly. But that everything was his love, his wisdom, and his hope that you'd grow up to be someone who valued character over currency. Apparently, we both overestimated you. Ethan grabbed his briefcase. This isn't over. We'll get a lawyer. We'll subpoena your financial records. If you're hiding. Get out, I said, standing up. Get out of my house. The notary had already packed up his things, clearly uncomfortable with how this had unfolded. He hurried toward the door. Ethan stormed out, his face red with anger. Amanda stood up slowly, looking at me with wide eyes. Mom, You what, Amanda? You're sorry? You didn't mean it? You love me? I laughed, a bitter sound that didn't sound like me at all. Your husband just threatened to sue me, and you sat there and let him. You came into this house, the house where you grew up, where your father died, with a notary, expecting me to just hand over money without even asking how I was doing. Without even pretending this was about anything other than your bank account. We need it, she whispered. The wedding cost so much, and Ethan's investment firm isn't doing well, Anne. Stop, I said, holding up my hand. Just stop. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear about Ethan's failing business or your expensive wedding or any of it. I want you to leave. And I want you to think very carefully about what you've become. She stood there for another moment, tears streaming down her face, but she didn't apologize. She didn't choose me over the money. She just turned and walked out, leaving me standing in my living room, trembling with anger and heartbreak and a grief that somehow felt worse than when Richard died. I watched through the window as they got into that BMW. I saw Ethan yelling, his face contorted with rage, his hands gesturing wildly. I saw Amanda crying, her shoulders shaking. And then they drove away, leaving tire marks in the snow on my driveway like scars. I stood there for I don't know how long. Minutes. Hours. Time stopped meaning anything. Eventually, I made my way to Richard's chair and sat down, staring at nothing, feeling everything. This was worse than death. When Richard died, I lost him to something beyond anyone's control. But this? I was losing Amanda to greed, to manipulation, to choices she was actively making. And that hurt in ways I didn't know I could hurt. The days that followed were silent. No calls. No texts. Nothing. It was like Amanda had never existed, like those 32 years of being her mother had been erased the moment I didn't produce the millions she expected. But Ethan hadn't given up. Oh no, Ethan was just getting started. A week after their visit, I got a call from Marcus, my lawyer. Jennifer, he said, his voice serious. I need to inform you that someone's been making inquiries about your financial situation. Someone hired a private investigator to look into your assets. My blood ran cold. Let me guess. His name is Ethan Sterling. I can't confirm who hired them, Marcus said carefully. But the questions they're asking are very specific. They're looking for hidden accounts, trusts, offshore holdings. Whoever it is, they're convinced you're hiding money. What do I need to do? I asked, feeling suddenly very tired. Nothing, Marcus said. The trust is airtight. It's in your name, you're the sole beneficiary with Amanda as a conditional secondary beneficiary. Without your consent or a court order, which they'd never get, no one can touch it. But Jennifer, are you sure you want to keep this up? This is your daughter we're talking about. This is exactly why I need to keep it up, I said. If she's willing to sic private investigators on her own mother, then she's proven she's not ready for that money. She's proven that Richard was right to worry. After I hung up with Marcus, I sat down and wrote a letter. Not a text, not an email, but a real letter on real paper with a real pen. Because some things deserve the weight of permanence. Dear Amanda, I wrote, my hand shaking. I've had a week to think about what happened in this house, and I need you to understand something. The $5 million you're looking for isn't lost. It exists. Your father did leave it for you. But he also left me with instructions to make sure you were ready for it. Ready not in age, but in character. When your father was dying, he told me to test your heart before trusting your hands. At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. I thought it was just the morphine talking, the rambling thoughts of a man slipping away. But he knew. Somehow, he knew that money changes people. That the promise of wealth can corrupt even the best intentions. So I hid it. I put it in a trust that only I can access, and I waited to see what kind of person you'd become. I waited to see if you'd check on your grieving mother out of love or out of expectation of inheritance. I waited to see if you'd choose a man based on his character or his financial promises. I waited to see if you'd treat me with respect or just as an obstacle to your fortune. And now I have my answer. You showed up at my door with a notary, Amanda. Not with flowers. Not with a photo album from your wedding. Not with a simple, "How are you holding up, Mom?" You showed up with legal documents and your husband's demands and an expectation that I owed you something beyond the 32 years I've already given you. You let that man threaten me in my own home. You let his mother humiliate me at your bridal shower. You relegated me to a back table at your wedding like I was some distant relative you barely knew. You treated me like an ATM that wasn't dispensing cash fast enough. This isn't about the money, sweetheart. This has never been about the money. This is about respect. This is about love. This is about remembering where you came from and who sacrificed everything to get you where you are. The $5 million isn't a gift for greed. It's a measure of character. When you remember what matters, when you understand that your mother's love is worth more than any inheritance, when you realize that showing up for someone shouldn't require a financial incentive, then the door will always be open. Then we can talk about your father's gift and his wisdom. But until that day comes, until you've proven that you value people over profit, that money will stay exactly where it is. Safe. Protected. Waiting for the daughter I raised to come back to me. I love you. I always have. I always will. But loving you doesn't mean enabling you to become someone your father would be ashamed of. When you're ready to have a real relationship with me, one based on love, not money, you know where to find me. Mom. I sealed the letter, addressed it to her apartment, and mailed it the next day. Then I waited. The response came 3 days later, but not from Amanda. It came from a law firm. Sterling versus Lopez. They were suing me for wrongful retention of inherited assets and demanding a full accounting of Richard's estate. I called Marcus immediately. They can't do this, can they? I asked, my voice shaking. They can file whatever they want, Marcus said grimly. Doesn't mean they'll win. I'll handle it, Jennifer. Don't worry. The trust is solid, and Richards will give you complete discretion over the distribution of assets. They don't have a case. But I did. 4 months, I worried. The legal proceedings dragged on, each letter from the law firm more threatening than the last. Each one signed by Ethan's lawyers, each one demanding, accusing, implying that I was a thief stealing from my own daughter. Amanda never called. Never texted. Never sent her own letter. She let Ethan and his lawyers do all the talking, all the attacking. She disappeared behind their wall of litigation and left me to face it alone. I lost weight. Stopped sleeping. The house that had been my sanctuary became a prison of memories and regrets. Every room reminded me of Amanda at different ages, the kitchen where she'd helped me bake cookies, the living room where she'd practiced piano, the backyard where Richard had taught her to plant tomatoes. All those memories now tainted by the knowledge that somewhere along the way, I'd lost her. Or maybe she'd lost herself. The lawsuit was eventually dismissed. Marcus was right, they had no case. The judge took one look at Richard's will, at the trust documents, at the evidence of Amanda's complete financial security through her college years and beyond, and threw it out. The judge even remarked that it was disturbing to see a daughter sue her own mother over money that was never legally hers to begin with. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt relieved. But all I felt was empty. 6 months passed. 6 months of silence. 6 months of hoping my phone would ring and it would be her, really her, not Ethan or lawyers or investigators, just my daughter calling to say she was sorry, she was wrong, she wanted her mother back. The call never came. Then, one Tuesday morning in June, Marcus called me with news. "Jennifer, I thought you should know. I have a friend who works in family law, and she mentioned that Amanda Sterling filed for divorce last week." My heart stopped. Divorce? Apparently, Ethan's investment firm went under. Lost everything, including other people's money. There's talk of fraud charges. Amanda filed the paperwork the day the firm collapsed. I should have felt happy. I should have felt that sense of "I told you so" that comes when you're proven right about someone. But all I felt was sadness. Sadness that my daughter had to learn this lesson the hard way. Sadness that she'd wasted a year of her life on a con artist. Sadness that our relationship had been destroyed in the process. 3 weeks later, on a Sunday afternoon, I heard a knock on my door. I almost didn't answer. I'd gotten used to the solitude, the quiet, the absence of disappointment. But something made me get up from Richard's chair and walk to the door. Amanda stood on my porch, and she looked broken. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore jeans and a t-shirt I recognized from high school. No makeup. No designer clothes. No BMW in the driveway, just an old Honda that had seen better days. And she was crying. "Mom," she whispered, her voice cracking on that one word. I stood there, my hand on the doorframe, looking at this broken version of my daughter. Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face, to make her feel the pain I'd felt. Part of me wanted to pull her into my arms and never let go. "Can I come in?" she asked. "Please?" I stepped aside. She walked into the living room like she was seeing it for the first time. Touching the photos on the wall, the furniture, the piano she used to play. Like she was trying to remember something she'd lost. "I'm sorry," she said, turning to face me. "I'm so sorry, Mom. You were right. About everything. About Ethan, about his family, about what I'd become. You were right, and I was so stupid." I sat down slowly, my legs suddenly weak. "Tell me what happened." And she did. She told me everything. She told me how Ethan had changed after the wedding, becoming controlling and demanding. How he'd been furious when the inheritance didn't materialize, taking it out on her in small, cruel ways. How his business had been failing long before they met, and how he'd seen the daughter of Richard Lopez, as a lifeline, a bailout. She told me how his mother had been coaching him, how the whole family had been in on it. How they'd planned to use the inheritance to save Ethan's firm, to maintain their lifestyle, to keep up appearances. She told me how Ethan had pressured her to sue me, convincing her that I was being unreasonable, that the money was rightfully hers, that family wasn't as important as securing their future. "I let him convince me that you were the problem," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I let him turn me against my own mother because I was so caught up in being part of his world, being accepted by his family, being someone I thought was better than who I really was." She sank onto the couch, her whole body shaking with sobs. "When his firm collapsed, when I found out he'd been committing fraud, when I discovered he'd lied about everything, his success, his finances, even his feelings for me, I realized what I'd done. What I'd given up. I'd traded my mother, my integrity, my values, everything Dad taught me, for a man who saw me as a dollar sign." I sat there, listening, feeling the anger I'd carried for months starting to crack. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she continued. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. I just needed you to know that you were right. That Dad was right. That I failed the test so completely that I don't even recognize the person I became." She pulled something out of her bag, a photo album. The one I'd given her at the bridal shower. I looked through this every night after the divorce, she said. Looking at who I used to be. Trying to figure out where that little girl went. The one who used to tell you she'd love you even if you were poor because you made the best pancakes. The one who said she wanted to be just like you when she grew up. She opened it to a specific page, a photo of her at 8 years old, gap-toothed and grinning, holding a Mother's Day card she'd made. The card read, in crayon, "My mom is the richest person in the world because she has me." "I wrote that," she said, touching the photo gently. I believed it. And somewhere along the way, I forgot it. I forgot that richness isn't about money. I forgot everything you taught me. I couldn't hold it back anymore. The tears came, hot and heavy, all the grief and anger and love and pain pouring out of me in waves. "Why?" I asked, my voice raw. "Why did it take losing everything for you to remember who you were?" "Because I'm stupid," she said simply. "Because I'm selfish. Because I got so blinded by the idea of an easy life that I forgot what real life looks like. Real life looks like you, Mom. Working double shifts to keep me in ballet classes. Selling grandma's jewelry so I could go on a school trip. Staying up all night to help me with projects. That's what real wealth looks like, and I threw it away for a fantasy." She moved from the couch to kneel in front of my chair, looking up at me the way she used to when she was little and needed comfort after a nightmare. "I'm not here for the money," she said. "I need you to know that. I don't care about inheritance. I don't care if Dad left me $5 or 5 million. I just want my mom back. I just want a chance to remember who I'm supposed to be. Please, Mom. Please give me that chance." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw past the mistakes, past the pain, past the year of silence and hurt. I saw my daughter. My baby girl. The one I'd raised, the one I'd loved unconditionally even when she didn't deserve it. "You hurt me," I said, needing her to understand. "You hurt me in ways I didn't know I could be hurt. You chose money over me. You chose a con artist over your own mother. You sued me, Amanda. Your lawyers called me a thief." "I know," she sobbed. "I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you if you'll let me. I'll go to therapy. I'll do whatever it takes to fix what I broke. Just please, please don't give up on me." I reached out and touched her hair, the way I used to when she was small and scared. "I never gave up on you," I said softly. "Even when you gave up on me, even when you chose Ethan, even when those lawyers were sending me threatening letters, I never gave up on you. That's what mothers do. We love even when it hurts. We hope even when hope seems foolish." I pulled her up and into my arms, and she clung to me like she was drowning and I was the only solid thing in the world. "But things have to change," I said firmly, pulling back to look her in the eyes. "You have to understand what you did. You have to own it, not just apologize for it. You have to rebuild not just our relationship, but yourself. The person you became this past year? She's not my daughter. She's not Richard's daughter. And she's not who you're meant to be." "I know," she whispered. "I want to be better. I want to be the person you raised me to be." We sat there for a long time, just holding each other, crying together, beginning the long process of healing. Eventually, I got up and made tea, the way I always used to when Amanda was upset. We sat at the kitchen table, and I told her about the trust, about how her father had asked me to test her, about how I'd hidden the money not out of spite but out of love. $5 million, she said quietly. "All this time, it was there, and I was so horrible to you about it." "Your father knew," I said. "Somehow, he knew that wealth could corrupt. That people would come into your life wanting to use you. He wanted to make sure you understood the difference between having money and having character. He'd be so disappointed in me," she said, fresh tears falling. "He'd be disappointed in your choices," I corrected. But he'd also be proud that you came back. That you chose to fix things. That you recognized your mistakes. I got up and retrieved the trust documents from my safe. I laid them on the table between us. This is your inheritance, I said. $5 million, invested and grown over the past 2 years. It's yours. It was always yours. But I need you to understand something before I sign these over. She looked at the papers but didn't reach for them. Money is easy to spend and impossible to replace, I continued. Your father and I spent 52 years building this for you. Every dollar represents a choice we made, a vacation we didn't take, a restaurant meal we skipped, a luxury we denied ourselves. We chose to give you this instead of enjoying it ourselves because we loved you more than we loved comfort. Mom, she started, but I held up my hand. This money comes with responsibility, I said. Not just financial responsibility, but moral responsibility. You need to use it wisely. Invest it. Grow it. Maybe even pass it on to your own children someday. But more than that, you need to remember what it cost. What it represents. It's not just numbers on a page. It's love turned into legacy. She nodded, understanding in her eyes for the first time. I want you to take some time, I said, pushing the documents toward her. Take 6 months. Get divorced from Ethan. Go to therapy. Figure out who you are without money hanging over your head. And when you're ready, when you've proven to yourself, not to me, but to yourself, that you understand what matters, then we'll make this official. You're still testing me, she said, not accusingly, just observing. I'm giving you time to test yourself, I corrected. To prove that you came back for the right reasons. Not because Ethan's money ran out. Not because you had nowhere else to go. But because you genuinely want to be my daughter again. She took my hands across the table. I do, Mom. More than anything. Then show me, I said gently. Not with words, but with actions. Show me over the next 6 months that family matters more than finances. That relationships matter more than bank accounts. That love is the only real inheritance worth having. She squeezed my hands. Okay. I'll prove it. I promise. And she did. Over the next 6 months, Amanda came over every Sunday for dinner, just like she used to before Ethan. She'd help me cook, and we'd eat at the kitchen table, talking about everything and nothing. She never mentioned the money. Never asked about the trust. She just showed up, week after week, rebuilding the relationship she'd shattered. She started therapy, working through why she'd been so susceptible to Ethan's manipulation. She talked about feeling pressure to be successful, to live up to some imagined standard, to prove she was more than just Richard Lopez's daughter. She got a new job, a modest position at a small marketing firm, and moved into a tiny apartment she could barely afford. When I offered to help with rent, she refused. I need to do this on my own, Mom, she said. I need to remember what it feels like to work for something, to earn something, to not have everything handed to me. She volunteered at a women's shelter, working with women escaping abusive relationships. She said it helped her understand her own escape from Ethan, her own journey back to herself. She went through the photo albums with me, asking me to tell her stories about her childhood, about Richard, about the life we'd built together. She was trying to reconnect with her roots, with her history, with the values she'd forgotten. On the 6-month anniversary of that first visit, she came over for our Sunday dinner as usual. But this time, she brought something with her, a framed photo of the 3 of us, her, me, and Richard, taken at her high school graduation. We were all smiling, arms around each other, looking at the camera like we had all the time in the world. I want you to have this, she said, handing it to me. To replace the memories I tainted. To remind you that we were once a happy family, and maybe we can be again. I took the frame, tears already forming. We are a family, Amanda. We never stopped being a family. Even when I sued you, she asked quietly. Even then, I said. Even when you hurt me the worst, you were still my daughter. Still the little girl I rocked to sleep. Still the person I'd die for without hesitation. She started crying, and I pulled her close. I think I'm ready now, she said into my shoulder. I think I understand. I knew what she meant. The trust. The inheritance. The test. The next day, we went to Marcus's office together. I brought the trust documents, and Amanda brought nothing but herself, no Ethan, no notary, no demands. Just my daughter, humble and grateful and finally understanding what her father had wanted her to learn. Marcus looked at both of us, a slight smile on his face. I'm glad to see you both here together. Jennifer, are you sure you're ready to release the trust? I looked at Amanda, really looked at her. I saw the woman she'd become over the past 6 months, stronger, wiser, more herself than she'd been in years. I saw the daughter I'd raised, the one who understood that character mattered more than currency. Yes, I said. She's ready. She's finally ready. We signed the papers together, transferring the $5 million, now grown to $5.7 million with investments, into Amanda's name. As she signed her name on the final document, her hand shook. This is really it, she whispered. This is what I almost destroyed our relationship over. No, I said gently. This is what revealed your character. The money was just a tool. The test was always about love, respect, and remembering what matters. She put down the pen and turned to me. Thank you, Mom. Not for the money. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for loving me enough to let me fail and then helping me find my way back. We left Marcus's office together, and instead of going home, we drove to the cemetery where Richard was buried. We hadn't been there together since the funeral. We sat on the bench in front of his headstone, and Amanda placed flowers she'd brought, daisies, his favorite. Hi, Dad, she said softly. I'm sorry it took me so long to understand. But I get it now. I get what you were trying to teach me. Character over currency. Love over luxury. Family over fortune. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat there in comfortable silence, two women who'd survived a test that nearly broke them both. What are you going to do with it? I finally asked. The money? She thought for a moment. I'm going to invest most of it, like you said. Make sure it's there for the future, for the family I might have someday. But I want to use some of it to start a foundation. Something in Dad's name. Something that helps families stay together when financial stress tries to tear them apart. I smiled, pride swelling in my chest. Your father would love that. And Mom, she added, squeezing my hand. I want you to be co-director. I want us to build it together. I want your name on it too, because you both taught me this lesson. You both loved me enough to make sure I learned it. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, tears streaming down my face, but this time, they were happy tears. Healing tears. We sat there until the sun started to set, talking about plans for the foundation, about life, about nothing and everything. Just a mother and daughter, together again, stronger for having been broken and repaired. As we walked back to the car, Amanda turned to me one more time. Mom, I need you to know something. If you had never given me that money, if you had decided I failed the test completely and kept it all, I would have understood. I would have accepted it. Because these past 6 months, having you back in my life, having this relationship restored, that's been worth more than any amount of money could ever be. I pulled her into a hug right there in the cemetery parking lot. That, I said, is how I know your father would be proud. That right there is the daughter we raised. Welcome back, baby. Welcome home. Now, months later, As I tell you this story, Amanda and I run the Richard Lopez Family Foundation together. We help families facing financial hardship, but more importantly, we help them remember what matters. We counsel young people about the dangers of valuing wealth over relationships. We teach financial literacy alongside emotional intelligence. And every Sunday, without fail, Amanda comes over for dinner. Sometimes she brings friends, sometimes she comes alone, but she always comes. She always shows up. Not because she has to, not because there's money involved, but because she wants to. Because she's finally learned that love without respect is poverty, no matter how much money you have in the bank. The $5 million inheritance wasn't a gift. It was a mirror. It reflected back who we really were when we thought no one was watching. For Ethan, it revealed greed and deception. For Amanda, it revealed how easily we can lose ourselves when we stop valuing what really matters. And for me, it revealed that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting someone fall so they can learn to stand on their own. If you liked this story, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me where you're watching from in the comments. But more importantly, remember this: sometimes hiding the truth isn't betrayal. Sometimes it's protection. Sometimes it's love in its truest form. And if you're lucky enough to have someone in your life who loves you enough to test your character, don't waste it. Don't make them wait months or years to see who you really are. Show them now. Show them every day. Because at the end of our lives, when we're sitting in Richard's chair or lying in a hospital bed with our final words on our lips, we don't count our money. We count our moments. We count our relationships. We count the times we chose love over greed, character over currency, family over fortune. That's the real inheritance. That's what lasts. That's what matters. And thank God I learned it in time to teach it to my daughter before it was too late. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. And remember, the richest people in the world aren't the ones with the most money in their accounts. They're the ones with the most love in their hearts. Be rich where it counts. The rest is just numbers on a page.